Hey everyone, thank you so much, Yanni, for the introduction. And again, thanks everybody who's on this incredible panel. I think one of the things that is vital to talk about is where people have come from and where they're going. I think a story that a lot of folks in the trans community don't hear from are leaders who have been formerly homeless and who have overcome homelessness. I know for me, as a young person, I was homeless from the age of 15 for a year and a half in Portland, Maine, which is a pretty small place. And at the time, in the late 90s, we had no youth shelter, period. Portland only has about 65,000 people. And so almost all forms of homelessness were sleeping in parks or on streets, or were couch hopping. And so one of the things that I heard here that I think Megan touched on that I think is really powerful are thinking about paths through and out of homelessness through community. One of the things that was most powerful for me in my life, I was able to get into the foster care system. And people think of the foster care system as a system that places you in a foster family. Maine had structured their system differently, so they provided independent living assistance through a caseworker and independent living skills worker, combined with unrestricted funds for housing, schools, clothing, and food. And so essentially they placed you into an apartment and gave you a case manager that you had to check in with regularly, and used that as a system to actually create informal group homes. So a number of queer and trans young people sheltered together in apartments and provided mutual support as we all tried to work our way through school and homelessness. So I think one of the things that, as a social worker, as I went through my social work education, and I sort of learned, what are the systems, and I'm a big level thinker, I like to think the big picture, what are the things that have driven the way that we have structured programs in the past? And I'm going to give a little bit of a history lesson about how our country has structured social welfare in particular. So our system for social welfare is very different than Western Europe, and most folks in this room know that. And it's because there is a belief system difference about how and who deserves social welfare assistance. So we talk about homelessness, and frequently our conversation drifts towards young people, and that's not to say that young people shouldn't be at the center of our conversations about homelessness. Obviously, young people have significant barriers to providing for themselves, but this comes also from a history of what is considered worthy and unworthy poor. And worthy and unworthy poor consisted of a series of groups, and this came from the Elizabethan era, and we have persisted, at least in the UK and British colonies and in America, in thinking about worthy and unworthy groups as women, children, the elderly, and people with disabilities as the four worthy groups. And for trans folks, this provides some serious problems. A lot of our systems are structured around male and female identities, right? For two reasons: safety, but then also this other reason of thinking about who deserves assistance. So I think as we engage in a conversation, and I'm actually looking forward to the future work, I think a panel provides an opportunity to elevate the conversation, to drive us to a place of recognizing that it's a vital conversation to happen. But I think much like our past work over the last 3 years to remove health insurance exclusions, the future work is creating a coalition of organizations that can interact with folks like the King County Coalition to End Youth Homelessness, the King County Coalition to End Homelessness, to drive forward policy change efforts and structural efforts around increasing access to gendered-specific spaces. So there are, prohibitions, right? Non-discrimination laws that theoretically folks should be able to access those spaces. But many people, including myself, know that when trying to access those spaces, they're exceptionally unsafe. Whenever you have a gendered segregated space, you create a policing system. So I think, my piece, I was trying to think about, what can I contribute to on this panel that is different? And I think sharing my personal story is one piece, but also talking about the history, and as we think about solutions moving forward, to be really clear that the best thing we can do is provide unrestricted approaches to let young people and homeless trans adults discern for themselves, to create agency around what the best solutions for themselves are. Structural systems that provide very limited and narrow systems, like a homeless shelter that says you have to be in by 7 p.m. and out by 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. Those things are not solutions that necessarily work for people. Housing with friends, housing together in groups, those things can look the most supportive. They can create community communities that can lead people out of homelessness through creating social structures. Homeless shelters, in particular, as a solution, can actually isolate people from community, right? They can, like, where are you gonna store your stuff? How are you gonna make long-lasting relationships that will then lead to future employment? How are you gonna get the social support to move through the challenges in your life? So I think as we move forward in this conversation, I'm looking forward to the continued effort, and I strongly suspect now that we've moved past some of the other removing health insurance barriers, there'll be a renewed willingness to create a coalition of organizations to actually think about and put forward policy approaches that will work for trans folks. So I'm done. Thanks, everyone.